All right. The other day, Donald Trump was doing an interview on Fox, and on in that interview, he was talking about the peace deal that he hopes to see between Russia and Ukraine, and he was talking about the situation. He was talking about all the stuff that had happened and how this whole thing began, and one of the things he said on this talk of his, again on Fox News, one of the things he said was, "You don't take on a nation that's 10 times your size." See, what he was getting at is, this is kind of Ukraine's fault. When Russia invaded, they never should have fought back. You don't take on a country that's 10 times your size. You figure out another way. You give in. You don't fight. You're not going to win. You can't win. They're too big for you. They're too strong for you. They're too aggressive. They're too whatever. You're going to lose. Why fight a losing battle? I wildly disagree with this mentality. Partly because I'm so stubborn that I rarely ever just simply give up. And maybe that is just a matter of being pig-headed. Maybe it's a matter of just being foolish. Maybe it's a matter that I don't know enough, or I haven't had enough experience. But I actually do authentically, sincerely, I believe in the power of the underdog. I believe that there is no one too big. I believe that we can always stand up, and we can always push back, and we can indeed defeat the giant. You probably know exactly where I'm going with this. There's a story in the Bible. I don't know if anybody else has heard this. I think I first heard it in Sunday school, because everybody has heard this in Sunday school. This story, well, it transcends religion. It's the story, of course, of David and Goliath. Now, the part we learned in Sunday school was David was a wee little boy and Goliath was a great big monster of a man. And David, with his sling, he picked a couple of stones out of the water, and with a sling he fought Goliath. Even though Goliath laughed at him, even though Goliath underestimated him, even though Goliath thought he was nothing, Goliath was just gonna step on him and that'd be the end of it. David, fighting for his country, fighting for his king, fighting for his God, wound that sling and fired that rock and hit Goliath in the head and killed him. Now, the way the story actually goes is it stuns Goliath. David then goes to Goliath, takes Goliath's sword, and chops off his head. They didn't teach us that when I was 5 and 6 years old, but that's what Scripture tells us happened. Now, this is literally the David and Goliath aspect of the story, that a little boy, and he would have been a young teenager, was willing and able to stand up against someone 10 times his size, with 10 times his experience, in a battle, and be victorious. But there's another part of this story that I don't think we can forget, in lieu of this notion that it is unacceptable to defend yourself against someone bigger. When David goes to that battle, he doesn't go there to fight Goliath. He's only there because his dad Jesse has given him a whole bunch of food and wine to take to his brothers. He's got a bunch of brothers, and they're all at this battle with all the other Israelite soldiers. David's brothers are there. And so David brings food and wine to his brothers from his dad, hoping to get some news from his brothers that he could take back to his dad. And when he's there, he hears Goliath far off yelling out for the Israelite hero. to stand up and fight him, for an Israelite, a brave enough Israelite to stand up and face him. The idea being, if Goliath beats the Israelites become slaves to Goliath's nation. And if the Israelites defeat Goliath, then Goliath's nation becomes slaves to the Israelites. And Goliath is tearing a strip off them. He's not just saying, I request at your earliest convenience you come forward to fight me. He's mocking them, and he's calling them names, and he's putting them down. He's disrespecting them, and they're not standing up to this, which means they're sort of, well, they're acting quite dishonorably in David's understanding. David watches them and can't understand why one of them won't stand up. I probably can't understand why there's not a line of Israelites willing to stand up against this guy. Now, ultimately, it's because they're all afraid. They all believe no good can come of standing up to this. They all believe that ultimately slavery would be more acceptable than standing up to the Goliath and being killed by him. And so David says, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. Let me at this guy. Let me at him. I'm tired of his lip. Let me at him. I can't believe you folks won't do it. And David does. He shames all of these Israelites. I thought you were our best. Why are you sitting here? But fine, I'll go do it. Now the king hears this. Looks at David. It's like, you're going to do it? You're going to be our hero? David's like, yep, I'll do it. Somebody's got to do it. I'll do it. Nobody else, none of these men are going to do it? Fine, I'll do it. And so the king, Saul, says, well, here, take my weapons, take my armor. None of it fits. Again, the king doesn't think David can do it with his current equipment. He doesn't think he can do it with his weapons. He doesn't think he can do it with his armor because he doesn't have any weapons and he doesn't have any armor. He has a sling, something that he would use to ward the wolves and the bears off, get them away from his flock. And King Saul's, he's in that same boat. You can't do it like this. You're too weak. You're too weak. You're too weak. David doesn't listen, and he goes and he fights and he wins. He goes and he fights and he wins, and the Philistines run away. They scatter, terrified of what they've just seen. That this giant bully that they've stood behind has fallen. Maybe it's because I heard this story as a kid, but I love this story. Not necessarily the violence of it, but I love David's audacity. I do. I love his audacity. I don't necessarily like how he speaks to his brothers and how he speaks to the soldiers, because I'm not a fan of shame, but I love his boldness. I really do. Again, I'm not a fan of him chopping off a head or doing this or doing that. There's much about this story that I find I'm not into it. But man, every time I read this story, I dig his attitude. I dig his attitude. He really believed that because God was on his side, he really believed that because God was on the side of the Israelites, that he could not be defeated. He really believed that he was going to win in that moment, on that day. Genuinely believed he was going to win. Now you could talk about the fact that Goliath, maybe he was overconfident, and that if he had taken David seriously, he would have equipped himself with the gear that he needed to protect himself from a rock flying at 100 miles an hour, or however fast those slings project a rock, a stone. You can say maybe it was his hubris that actually brought him down. That's fair enough. Bullies are often wildly overconfident. Right? Bullies are often wildly overconfident. People who have always been bigger, who have always been badder, people who have always gotten away with punishing and tormenting others, they're usually supremely confident that they'll get away with it again, that they'll be able to pull it off again. Now listen, we get together and we talk and we talk and we talk, and oftentimes we'll share with one another about how we're feeling hopeless and helpless, how we're feeling like there's nothing we can do. We'll talk and we'll talk and we'll share how we feel. We feel the weight of the oppression. We feel the burden of all of the cuts and all of the things that this administration is up to. Right? We'll talk and we'll share how we are feeling about the last 6 months and how we're feeling about the next 3.5 years. But God's with you. God's with you. Despite the fact that the bully seems to have all the gear, despite the fact that the bully seems to have all the equipment, despite the fact that the bully seems to be 9 feet tall and bulletproof, despite the fact that the bully seems to be 6 feet taller than us, 400 pounds heavier, despite the fact that the gear, the weapons, the tools that are normally used in a situation like this do not fit us, you can do it. We can do it. If we stand up boldly, courageously, if we stand up with a certain swagger to our step, if we stand up with a certain audacity, firmly believing I can't be defeated. We have got God on our side. We won't be defeated if we stand up and use what it is that God has given us. Use the tools that we have practiced with over these years. Goliath will fall. I really, when I heard this, I really disliked this message of you don't fight a nation that's 10 times bigger than yourself. You're absolutely right, you do. You don't face an enemy that's 10 times bigger than you. Yes, you do. You don't stand against someone that's 10 times bigger than you. Absolutely do. We don't call the person who goes out and beats up the vulnerable a hero. We don't call the person who goes up and takes away from those who are already struggling a hero. We don't call someone who goes out and mistreats those who don't think that they can fight back a hero. We don't call someone who goes out and allows the widows and the orphans to starve and allows the sick to die without doing anything a hero. We call them a bully and a tyrant and a monster. We don't call the selfish heroes. We don't call the greedy heroes. We don't call the violent, like the needlessly cruel and violent heroes. We don't call people who go from person to person in masks heroes. We call them monsters and bullies and tyrants. Be a hero. Be a hero. Use what it is that God has given you. Your love, your courage, your willingness to share, your willingness to provide. Use what it is that God has given you, your joy and your sincerity, your gentleness and your kindness. Use the gifts that God has given you, those fruits of the Spirit, use those to stand against the monster. Use those to stand against the tyrant. Use those to stand against the bully. Use those to stand against the giant. We will be successful. We will be victorious. We can and should be willing to stand against those who are 10 times more powerful than ourselves. History remembers those people as heroes. Amen.